Hello, I'm your storyteller tonight. I know you're here looking for something to calm you down, something to help you fall asleep, and I'm here to help you do just that with some of the best true horror stories told slowly in the rain. Before we get started, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know, where are you from and what time is it? Now close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Let the tension go and relax. I moved to a small town, a few hours' drive from the city. A peaceful place with gentle rain at night and old cobblestone streets. The house I rented was at the end of a narrow alley 2 stories, with a rotting wooden balcony and a string of dim yellow lights that flickered as night fell. Everything felt calm, until I noticed an unlocked room at the end of the second-floor hallway. When I first moved in, I didn't pay much attention to that room. The door was old and white, its hinges rusted. I assumed it was just a storage space. But one rainy night, as I lay reading, I heard a faint clicking sound like fingers gently brushing a metal doorknob. I stepped out of my bedroom, turned on the hallway light, but everything was still. Nothing moved. I checked the door and tried the handle, but it was stiff, as if locked from the inside. I shrugged it off as just the wind and went back to bed. But the next night, I heard the sound again. This time, there was also a soft dragging noise like someone walking barefoot across the old wooden floor. I didn't dare approach. I simply watched from a distance, heart pounding in my chest. The next day, I asked the landlady, an elderly woman with silver-white hair who lived a few blocks away. When I mentioned the room at the end of the hallway, she fell silent. Her gaze drifted somewhere far away before she finally said, "Oh, that room? It's best to leave it be." I asked more, but she only shook her head and changed the subject. That night, the rain fell harder. The sound of it tapping the rooftop was almost soothing. I tried to fall asleep early, but a noise woke me this time, knocking. 3 knocks, a pause, then 3 more. I quietly stepped into the hallway. The dim yellow light painted the cracked walls with a sickly glow. The door remained shut, but the knocking had clearly come from inside. I stepped back, my heart nearly stopping. I wanted to believe I was imagining it, that the rain and wind had played tricks on my mind. But when I returned to my room, I saw a wet footprint on the wooden floor, leading from the hallway to my door. I stood frozen. I didn't turn on the light. I just stared into the dark. The rain still fell, but in my head, only one question remained. Who had walked past here? The next morning, I decided to find the key to that room. In the kitchen, inside a small drawer, was a rusted bundle of old keys left by a previous tenant. I tried them one by one. At last, I heard a soft click. The door creaked open. The room was dusty, covered in cobwebs, yet it was clear someone had once lived there. A small bed, an old writing desk, and picture frame face down on the table. I picked it up. It showed a pale little girl, around 10, standing in front of this very house. Her eyes seemed to stare straight at me. Below, the photo read, Elise minus 1994. A chill ran down my spine. The photo looked far newer than the age of the house. I left the room, closed the door, and hid the key away. After that, the knocking stopped, but it wasn't over. One rainy night, while washing my face in the bathroom, I glimpsed a small figure passing through the hallway in the foggy mirror. I rushed out, but found nothing, just the dim light and empty air. I didn't dare call out her name. I only whispered, "Elise?" No reply came, but somewhere deep in the house, I heard that faint click again, the doorknob turning slowly. Weeks passed, and I began to grow used to her presence. Elise, if that truly was the girl in the photo, never tried to harm me. Whenever it rained, I'd hear soft footsteps, or the sound of a chair being gently moved, as if someone else quietly shared the space with me in the dark. I even placed the photo back on the table in her room, wiped away the dust, and whispered, "You can stay if you want to." One night, I woke up with the feeling that someone was standing by my bed. But when I opened my eyes, the room was empty. Yet the next morning, I found a small shawl neatly folded on the armchair in the living room. I had never seen it before. It was embroidered with a single silver letter, E. I placed it in the back room beside Elise's photo. Then gently closed the door. Since then, things have been peaceful. No more knocking, no more wet footprints, only the sound of rain falling each night, and the sense that someone else still lingers in the house. I never told anyone. No one would believe me, but I know. Elise is still here, and perhaps all she ever wanted was a place to rest. Or maybe someone so she wouldn't be alone. I found the radio in a second-hand shop on the outskirts of town. It was old, dark wood with rusted dials and a speaker grill torn in one corner. The shopkeeper said only one thing: "Don't turn it on at night." I laughed, thinking he was just trying to add some mystery to the item. But I bought it anyway. I've always had a soft spot for things that carry the weight of time. The house I rented sat on the edge of town, with few neighbors around. On the first night, it rained, the drops tapping on the metal roof like whispers. I wiped the dust off the radio, plugged it in, and turned the dial. Nothing but static. But when the clock struck midnight, the radio turned on by itself. At first, it was just the usual crackle of white noise. I was about to get up and turn it off when a woman's voice came through, soft and distant. "Can ... anyone hear me?" I thought I was imagining it, but the voice repeated, clearer this time, "I'm still here ... I stepped back, eyes fixed on the radio. This wasn't a regular broadcast. Not at this hour. Not during a storm. I tried turning it off. The dial didn't respond. I unplugged it. It kept playing. The voice distorted, like someone trying to speak through water. Murmurs began to echo unintelligible, almost chant-like. I covered my ears, heart pounding. And then it all stopped. Silence returned. Only the soft patter of rain outside remained. The next morning, I inspected the radio again. Useless. No power, no response. I considered throwing it away, but something made me pause. Curious, I checked underneath. Faintly etched into the wood were the words: "Prototype, 1965, Station No. 9. I'd never heard of any such station. A quiet unease settled in my mind. That night, I placed the radio on the table and started recording with my phone. I needed to be sure I wasn't imagining things. At exactly midnight, the radio turned on again. This time, the voice was clearer, closer. "Can you hear me? Please ... Goosebumps rose on my skin. Her voice was soft, filled with sadness. There was nothing else, just her voice and the steady rain outside. The next morning, I replayed the recording. Only rain, a bit of static. No voice. Nothing. I rewound it and listened again. Still nothing. Even though I knew I had heard her. It made me question my sanity. Or maybe something didn't want to be recorded. Over the next few nights, voice began saying more. She spoke of a terrible storm, of a small abandoned recording studio, of being trapped between the waves. I didn't fully understand, but it felt real, as if she were stuck inside the radio, looping through a moment in time I couldn't reach. She asked only one thing: "Please don't turn off the radio. Please, don't leave me alone." I wasn't afraid anymore. Each night, I'd sit before the radio and listen. Sometimes she would sing. Sometimes she'd whisper, "Thank you for still being here." I didn't know who she was, or why her voice only came at midnight. but I felt her loneliness. And on those rainy nights, I too found comfort in sharing. The dark with someone else. One evening, she said, "If you want, I can show you the way." Then she recited a string of numbers. I wrote them down. Out of curiosity, I looked them up. They pointed to a small forest, over 2 hours' drive from town. I didn't know if I should go. Maybe it was where she vanished, or where the broadcast first began. But I never made the trip. I was still thinking ... Then, one night, the radio didn't turn on. I waited past midnight. Silence. No voice. No static. Only the faintest sound of rain. I sat alone in that room, feeling a strange emptiness, as if an invisible friend had left without saying goodbye. The radio remained on the table, still, lifeless. I still keep it there. I turn it on every night, though I know nothing will come. I sit in silence, listening to the rain and imagining. Somewhere, between the static, she's still calling, still hoping someone will hear her. Maybe, one night, her voice will return. Or maybe, it never will, but I still wait. Because sometimes, the scariest thing isn't the voice in the dark, it's the silence. I took a night watch job at an old library in a small town, one that almost no one visits anymore. The building was 2 stories tall, its stone walls covered in moss, filled with the scent of damp paper and rotting wood. The schedule was simple. Every night from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., no visitors. No one borrowing books, just me, and thousands of silent books resting in the dark. The library had one strange rule: do not go upstairs after midnight. I asked the manager, a thin, weary old man, about it. He looked at me for a moment before quietly replying, "You don't need to know why. Just follow it." I chuckled, thinking it was just an old superstition meant to scare new hires. But on my first night, when the clock struck midnight, I started to understand. I was sitting in the guard room, yellow light glowing over stacks of old newspapers. Outside, the rain was falling steadily. Then I heard it, footsteps, very soft, as if someone was walking down the hallway on the 2nd floor. I stood up, grabbed my flashlight, and listened. No one was supposed to be up there. The library was locked. Only I was there. At least, that's what I thought. I stepped out and crept toward the wooden staircase. Every step I took creaked. Beneath me, just as I reached the final stair, the footsteps above suddenly stopped. I raised the flashlight and aimed it down the dark 2nd floor corridor. No one. Only dusty shelves and shifting shadows. But I could feel it. Something was watching me. I went back downstairs and closed the stair door as before. Nothing else happened that night, but I couldn't sleep. There was something up there. I told myself it could have been rats, wind, a stray cat. But the next night, at exactly midnight, I heard it again. The same footsteps, the same pace, not hurried, not panicked, as if someone was searching for something. Among the darkness and old paper, I decided to investigate more carefully. Flashlight in hand, I opened the door to the 2nd floor and climbed once again. Wind slipped through a broken window, making the curtain sway gently. I walked the hallway, shining my light through the thick rows of shelves. Then I saw it. A shadow, just a glimpse. It slipped behind the end of the corridor. I ran to it, but found only dust and a book lying on the floor. I picked it up. An old brown leather cover. No title. Inside were handwritten entries in black ink, each page a short journal entry from years ago, written by someone who called himself the Night Watchman. He wrote about hearing footsteps, about someone who always appeared after midnight. He called the figure the Late Reader. I brought the book back to the guard room and read the final pages. The night watchman said the figure never spoke, just wandered quietly between the shelves each night. One evening, he decided to follow it. But after that, there were no more entries. The final page had just one scribbled sentence. Don't follow him. He's waiting. And then, nothing. Just a vast, blank space. I meant to return the book to the shelf. But the next morning, when I checked the catalog, it wasn't listed anywhere. As if it never existed. The library records didn't mention any night watchman before me in the past 30 years. I asked the manager. He simply said, not everything needs to be known, then closed the ledger and refused to say more. In the nights that followed, I stopped going upstairs. But the footsteps continued, sometimes close, sometimes distant. Once, I found a book placed on the desk, one I hadn't touched. Always the same kind, no title, no table of contents. Inside were strange stories about people who vanished. One sentence repeated throughout. He only reads those who dare to look back. One rainy night, I opened the library doors wide, letting the sound of rain echo through the halls. I sat in the guard room, holding another unnamed book that had appeared on the table. And I swear, when I turned the first page, I saw my own handwriting, my notes, my ink, even a passage I'd written the night before. As if I had written this story long ago. I'm still here, still the night watchman. And upstairs, the footsteps continue. Maybe one night I'll go up again. Or maybe someone else will replace me. Sit in the guard room, listen to the rain, and hear the books whispering in the dark. If you ever visit this library and find a book without a name, just remember, some stories were never meant to have an ending. I moved into an old wooden house on the outskirts of town, living alone for the first time. The house had 2 floors and an unused attic. The ceilings were low, covered in dust, and the air smelled musty and damp. Before handing over the keys, the landlord warned me, there's nothing in the attic, ... But if you hear ticking at night, leave it be. Don't open the door. I just laughed, thinking it was superstition. On the first night, it rained lightly. I turned on my night lamp, lay down with a book, and listened to the raindrops tapping on the window. Around midnight, I began to hear a faint sound. Tit dot 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 tuck dot 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 tuck dot tut dot tut 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 tick tick dot dot tutty dot. I began to tight. I began to hear a faint sound. It echoed rhythmically from the ceiling. I thought it might be a wall clock, but there wasn't a single one in the house. The sound wasn't loud, but steady and clear, as if coming from right above my head. I went upstairs and shined my flashlight. At the attic door, nothing seemed unusual. The door was old, the lock rusted, but the ticking clearly came from behind it, steady like a grandfather clock in motion. I didn't open the door. I just stood there, listened for a while, then returned to bed, telling myself it was just a creak in the house's structure. But I couldn't fall asleep. In the following nights, the ticking returned always at exactly 11:47 p.m. and stopped precisely 1 hour later. Not a minute early, not a minute late. I started counting, keeping a log, and noticed something strange. The number of ticks increased each night, as if someone was winding up an invisible clock. It began to unsettle me, but curiosity won over. One night, I decided to open the attic. I pried the lock open with a knife. The door creaked loudly as it swung inward. Dust and the smell of old times spilled out. The attic was low, just enough to crouch inside. In my flashlight beam, I saw old objects, a broken rocking chair, torn picture frames, and in the center of the room, a large grandfather clock. It stood tall in dark wood, the glass face dusty, Yet the pendulum still swung, despite there being no electricity or winding key. I stepped closer. The ticking continued steady and unwavering. Tick dot 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 tock dot tuck tack dot dot. Tock dot 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 on the clock face were strange symbols, not numbers like hand-carved ancient markings. The brass pendulum reflected the flashlight, resembling an eye watching me. I wanted to leave, but as I turned my back, the clock changed rhythm. Tick dot dot, tick dot dot dot, tock dot 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 it again. But after that night, everything changed. The ticking still came, but no longer on schedule. Sometimes earlier, sometimes lasting until dawn. I began dreaming of strange things. The dusty attic, the clock with its face open, and a tall, shadowy figure beside it, featureless, with bony hands winding the clock. I told my neighbor. The old woman next door stared at me and whispered, "You opened it? There used to be someone who kept the time. Now, ... he knows you." I didn't understand what she meant. But from that night, small things started to change. The clocks in my house stopped ticking. My phone stopped updating time. All my electronic devices flickered as if tampered with. I tried to remove the grandfather clock from the attic, but I couldn't lift it. It was impossibly heavy, yet the wooden frame felt hollow to the touch. It was as if something was anchoring me there. In the nights that followed, I began hearing whispers. Not words, just soft noises like wind slipping through the wooden boards, accompanied by gentle clicks, like someone adjusting the time in the dark. I started journaling every night, but on every page, strange handwriting appeared halfway through, as if someone else had written in my notebook. A single phrase repeated, "The hour has begun." I no longer knew if I was awake or dreaming. The people I called said I was repeating myself, telling the wrong time, or going silent mid-sentence. It was as if time around me was warping. Bit by bit, I thought about leaving, but every time I tried, the clock would start ringing loudly. The ticking thundered through the whole house, like church bells. The front door locked itself. My phone lost signal. I sat in my room, the rain still falling outside, listening to the heartbeat of the clock. With every swing of the pendulum, its shadow stretched farther, as if trying to break into this world. I don't know how long I've lived here. Could be weeks, could be years. Time doesn't move the same anymore. I still hear the ticking each night, slower and slower, like something is counting down. I've stopped trying to understand. But if one day you hear the sound of ticking from an attic, don't go up. Let time pass on its own. On the edge of the small town where I live, there's an old inn called Rain. Its wooden sign, faded and cracked, hangs crookily under a mossy eave. The owner is a quiet old man who lives alone. The place hardly gets any guests except for the occasional traveler caught in a downpour. I stumbled upon it one stormy night when my motorbike broke down on a mountain road. The inn's yellow light glowed faintly through the cold gray rain, as if it had been waiting for someone. Old man didn't ask much. He simply handed me the key to room 3 and said the bath was at the end of the hall, with only half a tank of warm water left. I thanked him and headed up. The room was small and simple. A creaky wooden bed and a window that looked out over swaying pine trees. I tried calling my friend, but found I had no signal. My phone read, "No service." Even those strange flickers of reception blinked on and off for a moment. That night, I lay awake listening to the rain, hammering the tin roof, and the wind howling through the cracks in the window. Around midnight, I heard footsteps coming from the room next door. Room 2. Slow steps, like someone pacing. I figured another guest must have arrived, but when I asked the old man the next morning, he simply said, You were the only one here last night," then went silent as he brewed tea, as if unwilling to say more. I tried to brush it off. But on the second night, the footsteps returned. Same slow rhythm. Sometimes stopping right outside my door, then moving again, pacing room 2. I went out and knocked on that door. No answer. When I tried the handle, it turned. The room was empty. No sheets, no clothes. Just a single black and white photograph face down on the desk. I flipped it over. It showed a young man standing in front of the Rain Inn. The photo was faded, but his eyes were sharp, almost piercing through the lens. Behind him hung the same sign in the exact spot as now Dot in the corner of the photo. Faint handwriting read, "Last guest, 1978. I brought the photo downstairs." The old man glanced at it, sighed softly, and whispered, "I thought I burned that." I said nothing. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the door, watching the dark hallway. And just like the nights before, the footsteps returned. But this time, they didn't stop at room 2. They came straight to my door and knocked Dot 3 times. Slow, even, not urgent, just knocking, as if asking, "May I come in?" I didn't answer, didn't move, didn't even breathe. I just sat in the darkness. Dot, the next morning, there was a small puddle outside my door, though no one had opened it. Next to it, a soggy piece of paper. "Do you hear the rain?" The handwriting was jagged, the ink blurred. I asked the old man, but he just stood silently, then said quietly, "Years ago, someone stopped here during a storm too." But the next morning, he was gone. The room still locked from the inside. I planned to leave, but my bike still wouldn't start. People in town said there had never been an inn out there. That old house has been abandoned for decades. Someone said it used to be a rest stop for travelers. But after that disappearance, no one stayed. I laughed it off. But I had stayed there. I had met the old man. I had heard the footsteps. It was all real, right? I went back once. More. This time, the sky was clear. No rain, but the wooden house was completely empty. No lights, no people. The rain sign was gone. I climbed the stairs to room 3. It smelled more damp than before. And on the desk, the same black and white photo. But now, the person in it was me. Dot, standing in front of the inn, looking straight into the camera. Left immediately. But since that night, whenever it rains, I hear footsteps outside my front door. Slow, as if someone lost, searching for shelter. Dot, and last night, a photo appeared from a printer. I never bought. Dot in it. I'm standing at my front door. Behind me, a faint silhouette in the rain. Dot in the corner. A small caption. "This place is Rain 2. I live alone in a 3rd-floor apartment at the end of a quiet street. My balcony faces an old 3-story house that's been abandoned for years. Its walls are peeling, the glass windows coated in dust, and the iron gate is always locked. Every night, when the rain falls and the city drifts into sleep, I often stand on my balcony, looking over at that house. Everything is pitch dark except for one window. The 2nd-floor window, right in the middle, is always lit. I don't know who turns it on. A pale light glows from inside, flickering gently like candlelight. At first, I thought it was a reflection from the street lamp. But the more I watched, the more I realized something was off. The light only appears when it rains, and only after 11 p.m. Not a minute earlier, not a second later. As if someone was waiting for the exact time to begin. One night, I stayed up late and took out my old binoculars for a closer look. Through the foggy glass, I saw an empty room, except for a single wooden chair, turned away from the window. No one was sitting in it, but every night, that chair would turn just a little, as if someone had sat down, then left. I began to take notes. Each rainy night, each slight shift. Slowly, the chair turned toward the window. Toward me. I told my friends about it. They said I was just bored, or maybe getting paranoid from living alone too long. I told myself the same. But then, one stormy night, just as I drew my bedroom curtains, I saw the light turn on again in that house across the street. Only this time, it wasn't the second floor. It was the third floor window level with mine. I froze. That window had never lit up before. I quickly grabbed the binoculars. In the dim light, I saw someone standing by the window. I couldn't see the face, no movement, just standing there, perfectly still, as if staring straight at me. I lowered the binoculars, heart racing. When I looked again, the light was off. The house returned to darkness. Only the sound of rain remained, and the creeping feeling that someone was watching me from across the silent street. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination. But the next night, the chair on the second floor was gone, vanished, and the third floor window lit up again, just like before. No one stood there this time, but I noticed something. The window was slightly ajar, and right on the edge of the glass, there was a small piece of white paper. I couldn't make out the writing, only that it was stuck at eye level facing me. The next morning, I crossed the street, determined to verify everything. But the gate was locked. The windows were shut. No paper, no light. I asked the neighbor next door, and they said, that house has been abandoned since 2004. The last person who lived there was a single man. He disappeared during a heavy storm. No one's seen him since. The police never found a trace. That night, it rained again. I opened my window, trying to stay calm. The third floor light came on, faint and flickering. I couldn't resist. Picked up the binoculars once more. This time, there was a larger piece of paper, taped clearly to the center of the window. On it, in shaky capital letters, it read, I see you. Do you see me? I dropped the binoculars. My heart stopped for a second. I couldn't sleep. But eventually, as exhaustion took over, I drifted into a dream. In it, I was inside the abandoned house, looking out the window. On the other side, someone me was standing with binoculars. The dream felt too real. So real that when I woke up, my hands were ice cold, as if I had held something metallic, and they were covered in dust, the same kind as the floors in that abandoned house. I don't look over there anymore. I've closed the curtains, locked the doors, even turned off the Wi-Fi, like someone losing control. But every time it rains, I still feel a gaze from across the street. I don't know who, I don't know why, but it lingers silent, waiting, as if expecting me to respond. I no longer take notes. I don't use the binoculars. But in my bathroom mirror, I sometimes see a figure standing by my window. I'm thinking about moving. But last night, I found a small piece of paper slipped under my door. It read, this house once had someone living alone, too. They used to look across as well. No name, no date, just that. I don't know if I'm the observer, or if I've become the observed. But since that night, the light in that window has never turned off again. I recently moved into an old 2-story house on the edge of town, where everything seems forgotten by time. The house was surprisingly cheap and quiet, perfect for someone like me who needs a peaceful place to write. Ever since I moved in, I've been sleeping better, maybe thanks to the steady sound of rain tapping on the tile roof each night. But after just a week, I started hearing strange noises, not from outside. From the room downstairs. The house only has 2 bedrooms upstairs. Downstairs is the living room and kitchen. No one else lives here. I always turn off all the lights before going to bed. Yet around 2 a.m., I hear the sound of a chair being dragged. Slow, steady, then it stops. At first, I thought it might be mice or the wind, but the sound returned night after night. Each time, it seemed closer, clearer, as if someone was rearranging furniture in the dark. I froze in bed, too afraid to go check. But in the morning, everything looked normal. No sign of anything. Until one day, I left a small pen on the edge of the kitchen table. The next morning, it was lying in the middle of the floor, several steps from the table. I don't remember dropping it, but I'm certain it couldn't have fallen that far on its own. I called the previous owner to ask if there was anything unusual about the house. The old woman hesitated, then said, "No one's lived there for a while. Before you, there was a man who lived alone. He used to arrange chairs every night because he couldn't sleep, but he passed away 3 years ago, right in the living room." She said there was nothing to worry about. I laughed and thanked her. But that night, I heard the dragging sound again. This time, it was longer. Heavier. I gathered my courage, turned on the lights, grabbed a flashlight, and went downstairs. No one was there, but one of the kitchen chairs had been dragged slightly away from the table. I pushed it back into place, locked the kitchen door, and went back to sleep. But in the middle of the night, when I got up to use the bathroom, I saw the kitchen light was on. I swear I had turned it off. And then came the familiar sound. Scrape, scrape, the sound of chair legs on old tile. I tried to ignore it, thinking it was just wind or the quirks of an old house. But then I began hearing a faint cough, light like from an elderly man. Just once each night, after the chair sounds. Then silence. No footsteps, no creaking doors. Just the soft rain outside and the feeling that someone was still living downstairs, stuck in an old routine they couldn't let go of. I started leaving a warm cup of tea on the kitchen table before bed. The next morning, the cup would be half empty, the lid gone, no steam. I didn't remember touching it, but from that night on, the chair sounds became softer, as if someone felt comforted. I began placing a cup of tea each night, and it was always partially drunk. No visitors, no signs of a break-in. Just rain, a chair, and a cup of tea that slowly emptied. 1 week later, I left a small note beside the cup. "Sleep well." The next morning beside it was a scribbled reply. "Thank you." I don't know who wrote it. I live alone, and no one else has a key. I brought the note upstairs, keeping it as a memento. And after that night, I never heard the chair drag again. Only, sometimes when I come downstairs, the tea has already been poured. I'm no longer sure if I live alone in this house, but I feel more at peace. The sounds that once kept me awake now make the house feel less empty. I still leave tea each night, and it's always half finished. Once, I left some biscuits. The next morning, only crumbs remained on the tables. Edged out sometimes. On nights when the rain is especially heavy, I still hear a faint scrape of a chair, like a quiet greeting. I don't respond, I just listen. It's a presence. Gentle, not frightening, not ghostly. Just someone who doesn't want to be forgotten. Much like me, a solitary soul who happened to live in a house where the past still lingers. Try an 8. I rented a small apartment on the 3rd floor of an old building where the hallway was dim and narrow, and the elevator sometimes creaked, like it was sighing. I chose this place because it was cheap and quiet and close to work. The room had only one small window overlooking a vacant lot behind the building, where no one ever passed by. I usually kept the curtains tightly shut, especially at night. There was a strange corner in the room, where the ceiling didn't fully align with the wall. A narrow, dark crack ran from top to bottom. At first, I didn't pay it any mind, just thought it was an old construction flaw. But one rainy night, while I was lying in bed reading, I heard a faint clicking sound from that direction, like something lightly scratching the wall. One beat at a time, then silence. I moved closer and pressed my ear to the corner. Nothing. Complete silence, except for the rain outside. I tapped gently on the wall. It was just ordinary concrete, slightly damp and cold. I left the light on the entire night. Maybe I had imagined it, but the clicking came back the following nights. Always around midnight. Always in the same spot. I set up a camera aimed at that corner. The next morning, I reviewed the footage. It was quiet throughout, but at 11:57 p.m. something, very faint like a shadow, drifted across the edge of the frame. No clear shape, no sound, just a blur very fast. I convinced myself it was light distortion or a glitch. But the next night, when I turned on the light, I saw a small circular mark on the wall dot. It looked like a handprint. Smaller than an adult's. Faint, almost invisible, unless you looked closely. I wiped it off. But a few nights later, it came back. And this time, there were two. I tried measuring the crack. It was only about 1 centimeter wide, too narrow for anything to pass through. But I always felt something inside, listening, waiting, only appearing when I wasn't watching. I called in a repairman to take a look. He glanced at it and chuckled. Probably just a crack in the drywall. Nothing serious. But I noticed he stared at the corner longer than necessary, like he was trying to remember something. Just before leaving, he asked quietly, "Have you heard knocking?" I froze. He gave an awkward smile and said it was just an old story he remembered from another unit. I didn't ask further. That night, I stayed up late, unable to sleep. At exactly 11:59, the room light flickered once. I wasn't sure if it was due to the storm or weak wiring, but the knocking returned clearer now, slow and steady. Knock, 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 then silence. I didn't dare move closer. I just lay still, buried under the blanket, waiting for morning. But when I opened my eyes, I noticed something strange. There was a small object at the foot of my bed. A button, old, made of wood, like from a child's clothing long ago. I didn't own anything like that. I picked it up and put it in a drawer. But the next night, there was another one. Then a frayed piece of ribbon. Every night, a small item like someone was leaving pieces of memory. And they were always placed in the same spot by the foot of the bed. I sealed the crack with glue and placed a bookshelf in front of it. Everything was quiet for 3 days. No knocks, no objects. But on the fourth night, I noticed the curtain had been pulled slightly to the side, even though I was sure I'd shut it tight. And on the floor was a chalk drawing, scrawled clumsily. It showed a figure curled in a corner, with wide, blank eyes staring straight at me. I planned to leave the apartment the next day, but while packing, I couldn't find any of the items. The buttons, the ribbon, the drawing, all gone, as if no one had ever left them. The crack in the wall was gone too, just a flat, clean surface. Still, I moved out, but sometimes, on rainy nights, I swear I can hear a faint knock behind the sofa. I live in an old 2-story house I inherited from my grandmother, who passed away 2 years ago. The house sits on the edge of town, where no one walks by after 9 p.m. I've never used the second floor. My grandmother had locked it long ago, and I respected that. The key remained untouched, resting in an old tin box in the drawer beneath the stairs. One night, as rain pattered softly on the tin roof, I was lying in bed reading when I heard footsteps. Light, slow, directly above me. I looked up at the ceiling. The second floor was supposed to have been locked for years. I stepped out into the hallway and looked up the dark staircase. No one was there, but the footsteps continued, as if someone was pacing slowly back and forth small feet, unhurried. I couldn't sleep that night. The next morning, I checked the second floor door. Still locked. The lock was covered in a fine layer of dust, with no signs of tampering. I opened the tin box and took out the key. My hands were trembling. The door creaked softly when I inserted the key, but I didn't open it. I put the key back in the box. That night, the footsteps returned. This time, there was also a faint tapping sound, like fingernails gently tapping on the wooden floor. I asked the neighbor about the house. An old woman sighed and said, "That upstairs room used to be your great-grandmother's. She was ill. Often imagined things. Sometimes she'd scream in the middle of the night and lock herself in. People say that after she passed, your grandmother locked the door forever. No one dared open it." I asked why. She whispered, "Because something never left." That night, the rain fell harder. The sounds above grew louder. Something heavy seemed to be dragging across the floor. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed the key, turned on the stairway light, and stepped up, one step at a time. Cold air clung to my skin. The old wooden door came into view. I inserted the key and turned it. The lock clicked open. I pushed the door. A cold gust blew out. The room was covered in dust, the air damp and filled with the scent of something old. Like dried peppermint dot in the corner was a rocking chair, facing the window. Someone had sat there for a long time. The cushion was visibly indented. On the floor was a small music box, the kind you wind by hand. Curiosity got the better of me, and I wound it. The melody began to play soft, distorted like a lullaby from far away. Suddenly, the rocking chair moved, not violently, just a gentle sway, as if someone had just gotten up a moment ago. I stepped back and bumped into an old bookshelf. A notebook fell to the floor. I picked it up. It was a diary. The last line, written in a shaky hand, read, "I still hear it. Every night it gets closer, but no one believes me. I will lock the door forever. If anyone finds this, please don't open it." The ink was smudged with water stains that looked like tears or something else. I left the room, shut the door, and locked it again. But that night, I didn't hear the footsteps anymore. Instead, I heard a soft lullaby drifting down from above the warped tune of the music box. I don't remember winding it that much, but I was sure I never wound it enough to play all night. I lay still, eyes wide open in the dark. The lullaby kept playing. It didn't stop. The next morning, I went to check. The room was still locked, but when I opened the door, the rocking chair was no longer facing the window. It had turned toward the door, as if waiting for me. I left the house that very day, but every time it rains, even in my new apartment, I sometimes still hear the faint sound of a lullaby echoing from afar. And each time I wonder, did I really lock that door? Try in 10. I moved into a small house on the edge of town after a long, exhausting breakup. The house was old but cozy, with simple furnishings. Only one thing bothered me, the large mirror hanging in the living room. It was antique, framed in dark wood with intricate carvings, like something brought over from the previous century. The previous owner had left it, and at first, I didn't care much. Just at first, the mirror reflected the whole room when I turned on the soft yellow lights. But at night, with only the sound of rain tapping on the windows and dim lighting, I often had a strange feeling whenever I glanced at it, as if someone was standing behind me. It was never clear, just a shadow that flickered by. When I turned around, there was nothing. Everything was still. But that feeling, it kept happening. I tried covering it with a cloth, but that night I dreamt I was sitting in front of the mirror, pulling the cloth off with my own hands. In the dream, the reflection in the mirror moved, just a beat slower than me, as if it wasn't a reflection at all, but someone imitating me. The next morning, the cloth was on the floor. I didn't remember removing it. I asked an elderly neighbor about the house. She frowned. Oh, that mirror? The first owner brought it back from Europe, supposedly from a burned-down mansion. His wife used to sit in front of it for hours, until she died under strange circumstances. Since then, no one dares look into it for too long. I laughed nervously, but I felt a chill inside. One rainy night, I was reading, the weak light casting shadows on the walls. I glanced at the mirror. This time, I saw it clearly, a figure standing inside it. It didn't move, just stood there faint, blurry, faceless. I told myself it was a trick of the eye. But then, that figure slowly raised its hand like it was waving to me. My hand was still resting on my book. I hadn't moved. I turned on every light in the house, but the mirror remained darker than everything else, as if it didn't reflect light, but gave off its own dull, eerie glow. I decided to take it down, but when I tried lifting it off the wall, I saw scratch marks on the back, deep, long, like fingernails, scraping from the inside out. I called someone to remove it. The man took one look and shook his head. You can keep it if you want, but no one buys this kind. Old mirrors like this always come with stories. I nodded half-heartedly, but I was unsettled. That night, I heard a faint laugh, soft, coming from the living room. When I walked out, everything was silent. The mirror was still thereon, the wall quietly reflecting my image. I began to avoid looking into it, but every time I passed by, I felt someone's eyes following me. One night, I noticed my reflection didn't leave at the same time as me. It lingered, just stood there, watching me walk away. One day, while reviewing photos of the house, I saw something strange in a picture of the living room. Someone was sitting on the sofa, right beside me. But that day, I was alone. I left the house not long after. Nothing explicit had happened, but I couldn't stay in a place where the image in the mirror seemed to have a soul of its own. The strange thing is, I didn't take the mirror with me. But in my new apartment, sometimes when I wipe the bathroom mirror, I see a faint smudge like someone's handprint pressed from the other side. I moved to a small street in an old town where everyone knew each other's names and rarely locked their doors. The house I rented was at the end of the street, quiet, nestled beside a row of pines. At first, everything felt peaceful, except for one thing. Every night, around 2 a.m., from house number 12, abandoned for the past 3 years, came the faint sound of piano music, as soft as wind brushing through leaves dot by day. House 12 stood silent. Doors shut, dusty curtains drawn. Locals said the previous owner had been a music teacher, living alone. After she passed away from illness, the house remained untouched. No one entered. No one sold it. But each night, the melody would return. Gentle, melancholic, like someone whispering from the past. I asked the lady at the nearby grocery shop. She just shrugged. You hear it too? You're not the only one. But no one dares go near at night. They say the old music teacher used to play that piece the night her husband died. Then every year, at the same time, she'd sit at the piano until the day she didn't wake up. One light rainy night, unable to sleep, I stepped onto my porch to listen more closely. The music floated quietly through the drizzle. It was a sorrowful tune, like a call from somewhere far away. It seemed there wasn't just piano, but also a faint voice singing along, trembling, aged, distant. I looked toward the window of house 12. Through the rain, I glimpsed a dim yellow light inside. The window was slightly open. A figure sat at the piano, slightly hunched, silver-haired. She had her back to me, but I was certain she was alive. I blinked. When I looked again, the light was gone. The house was dark once more. Curious, I approached house 12 the next morning. The door was still locked, thick with dust. I circled to the back and peered through a cracked window. Inside, everything was old, covered in white cloth. But in the center of the room stood a piano, no dust at all, as if someone still played it every day. I didn't dare go in, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. That evening, the melody returned. But this time, the tune changed, a little rushed, almost choked. I suddenly felt as if she was trying to say something, something left unsaid. I took out my phone to record, hoping to replay and listen more carefully. But in the morning, when I played the recording, only rain. No music, no voice, nothing. I asked an elderly neighbor, "Has anyone ever seen someone go in or out of that house?" He shook his head. No one. But every year, on the anniversary of her death, the piano plays again. Many have heard it. Then they forget. Maybe she's just missing someone or waiting for someone to return. I didn't ask further. But that night, I sat in silence, listening to the entire piece. And I found myself crying out a week later. The music stopped completely. I didn't hear it again. Strangely, I felt empty. Without that melody, it was as if I had lost something important, something I couldn't quite name. I tried listening to similar pieces, but nothing matched that sound, as though it was played from memories that hadn't faded. One evening, passing by house 12, I saw a single white daisy on the windowsill, fresh, untouched, in the rain. I was sure no one in the neighborhood had left it there. And then the music played again, very briefly, just a few notes, then silence. I stood still in the falling rain, unsure whether it was a goodbye or a greeting. I moved into my grandmother's old house after she passed away, a small 2-story home sitting on the edge of town where it seemed to rain every night. The living room had a large window facing the backyard, a patch of overgrown grass untouched by streetlights. At first, everything felt normal, until the third night. I was reading when I heard a soft knock. 3 taps. Tap, tap, at the living room window. I looked up, but saw nothing. Maybe a branch tapping against the glass. But there was no wind outside. I walked over. No one was there. Just darkness and rain. I turned back inside. But that night, I couldn't sleep. The next morning, I checked the yard. No footprints. Just a single long smear on the window, like someone had dragged a wet finger down the glass. I wiped it away and tried to forget. But that night, there were 3 knocks again. Same rhythm. I turned on the light, pulled the curtain. Nothing had changed. Yet I swear I saw a shadow glide past the window. I told my aunt when she came to visit. She stayed quiet for a moment, then said, "Back window. When you were little, you used to wave and laugh, saying someone was standing out in the yard." I felt a chill. I didn't remember that. She gently placed her hand on my shoulder and said, "Don't open the door, no matter what you hear." I forced a laugh, thinking she was just trying to scare me. The next night, it rained hard. I sat in the living room without drawing the curtain. 1:47 a.m. 3 knocks again. But this time, I saw it clearly. A figure standing in the yard, motionless, no umbrella, in the rain. I couldn't make out the face. They just stood there, as if waiting. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I turned to grab my phone. When I looked back, the figure was gone. I rushed outside, hands trembling. The yard was empty, but beneath the window there was a footprint in the wet soil. Not mine, smaller, worn, like from an old person's shoe. From that night on, I no longer sat in the living room past midnight. I sealed the curtains shut, but even without seeing, I knew the figure came back. The knocks stayed consistent. Every night at 1:47, rain or not. One time I tried using headphones, blasting music, but the knocking still came like it echoed from inside my own head. The more I tried to ignore it, the clearer it became. I started dreaming of the window. In the dream, I would open the curtain and always see the same figure hunched back, wearing a dark raincoat and an old hat. The face was never clear, just a fixed, silent stare. And in the dream, I always opened the door. Each time, I woke up in a sweat, heart pounding. The curtains remained shut, the door still locked. But the chill never left. Gradually, it felt like the house no longer belonged to me. Sometimes I'd come home late to find the living room lights on, the window slightly open, the curtains swaying, as if someone had just been standing there. I began locking every door, even taping the windows shut. But still, at night, the knocking returned, as if the figure was already inside. I left the house after 3 weeks, moved in with a friend in the city. Before leaving, I stepped into the yard one last time. Beneath the window, the footprint was still there, fresh, clear, like someone had been standing there that very morning. I turned away, not daring to look back. But in the car, I glanced in the rearview mirror, saw the curtain in the living room shift slightly, even though the house was empty. I inherited a wooden house in the countryside after my father passed away. He had lived alone, in isolation, for decades. The house was old but tidy. Everything was quiet, except for one steady sound coming from the attic, a faint ticking, like a clock. But the strange thing was, I never found any clock. The attic was dark and dusty. I went up once, flashlight in hand, following the sound. But as soon as I stepped inside, the ticking stopped. No clock. Nothing but wooden crates, old books, and cobwebs. I backed away. The moment my foot touched the last step, the ticking resumed, as if it only ticked when I wasn't looking. I started paying attention to when the sound appeared. It wasn't consistent. Some nights it was loud and clear. Others it vanished completely. But usually it came between 2 and 3 a.m., always during that hour, like a heartbeat, not from this world, not the sound of a clock, more like the beat of an old, tired heart. I asked a neighbor, an old man named Tam, who lived a few houses away. He looked at me for a long time, then said, "The attic, huh? When your father first moved in, he used to talk about a strange ticking clock, too. As he got older, he heard it more clearly. Eventually, he started sleeping in the kitchen." I swallowed hard. Could the ticking have been here all along? I tried recording one night, left a device at the bottom of the stairs. The next morning, when I played it back, I heard something else. Not just ticking. There were faint sounds in between pages turning, and now and then a dry, raspy cough. Slow, like from a very old person, but I had been home alone. The next night, I stayed up, determined to catch it. Rain fell lightly outside. I sat under. The dim yellow light, ears tuned in. At 2:15, the ticking began. Soft, steady. I slowly climbed the stairs. This time, no warning, no turning off the light. I opened the attic door, and once again, the sound stopped. Nothing was there. I stood still. Suddenly, the light flickered. A breeze stirred. And then, I saw it. A small leather notebook lay in the middle of the attic, where there had been nothing the day before. I picked it up. The cover read, "Time, Waits for no one. Inside was my father's handwriting, but it looked different, shaky, like his hand was trembling, or forced. I flipped through a few pages. They were filled with time-stamped notes. 2:17, footsteps. 2:31, cough. 2:44, shadow under the door. Descriptions that matched exactly what I had experienced. But something was strange. The dates at the top of the pages were from years ago, and the final entry was dated today. Below it, in faint ink, tonight. It comes down. I shut the notebook, heart pounding, and ran from the attic. I barely slept that night, but nothing happened. No ticking, no shadows, just the steady fall of rain. The next morning, I returned to the attic. The notebook was gone, and from that day on, the sound never returned. I moved out a month later, taking nothing but a few photos of my father. But sometimes, on rainy nights, as I turn off the lights and prepare to sleep, I hear it again, a faint ticking from the corner of the room. Not steady, not fast, as if it's trying to find its rhythm again. And this time, there's nowhere left for me to run. I rented a small house in the countryside to rest for a few months. After going through a difficult breakup, the house sat at the end of a dirt road with no neighbors nearby. And it had one peculiar thing. There wasn't a single mirror in the entire place. Not in the bathroom, bedroom, or hallway, only empty. Wooden frames where mirrors once hung. I asked the landlady, an elderly woman named Mrs. Haitian, why there were no mirrors. She simply smiled, her voice raspy. Here, mirrors aren't necessary. Sometimes we don't want to see what's looking back. I thought she was speaking in metaphor, the way old people often do. But from the very first night, I began noticing strange things. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of trickling water in the bathroom. When I went to check, the faucet was tightly shut, but on the floor, a thin trail of water stretched across the tiles. I wiped it up and went back to bed. Minutes later, I had the unsettling feeling that someone was standing behind me. I turned on the light. No one there. Just my shadow on the wall, but something felt off. The shadow wasn't quite upright. Its head tilted slightly to the right. In an unnatural way, I tilted my own head, and the shadow followed but half a second behind. A chill ran down my neck. I grabbed my phone and used the camera like a mirror. Nothing strange, but I wasn't entirely sure that it was me staring back. I began to notice, whenever I used the front camera as a mirror, the eyes in the image didn't seem to look directly at me, but behind me. I ran a test, stood between two light sources, and recorded a video. And then I saw it in a blurry frame, a second shadow, shorter, standing one step behind me. Then it vanished. The next night, while trying to sleep, I heard the faint creaking of wood, as if someone was walking slowly down the hallway. I opened the door. No one. But on the glass pane, I saw a faint handprint, smaller and thinner than mine. Instinctively, I looked into the window. My reflection was still there, but it didn't blink when I did. I found an old mirror at a market and brought it home, hanging it in the bedroom. At first, nothing happened, but around midnight, I woke to a faint rattling. The mirror trembled slightly, as if something behind it was trying to get out. I sat up, heart pounding. In the mirror, I saw my reflection, still asleep in bed. I stepped closer, feeling the air turn icy. The reflection remained lying there, motionless, but its eyes were open, staring directly at me. I stumbled back, and the figure in the mirror slowly sat up, not matching my movements. For the first time, I understood what Mrs. Ashen meant when she said not everyone wants to see themselves. I carried the mirror into the backyard and smashed it under the rain. shards scattered everywhere. In one shard, I saw the reflection of someone who wasn't me. A figure in white, standing with their back turned. I spun around. No one there. After that night, I left the house without saying goodbye to Mrs. Achen. I just left the key and a quick note. The mirror is broken, but the reflection remains. Now I live in a city apartment. Mirrors hang on every wall, but I rarely look into them for long. Because every time my eyes meet my own reflection, I feel like something is still watching. From a place with no name, from the other side of the glass, and someday, I fear, that reflection will start to smile. I moved into a small house in a quiet town where time seemed to stand still. The house was old but cozy, except for one thing, an old pendulum clock hanging in the living room. It was large, made of reddish-brown wood with a dusty glass face. Strangely, it always showed the correct time, even though I had never changed the battery or wound it. I tried to stop the hands, but each morning it ticked away again. At first, I thought the previous owner had installed some kind of hidden mechanism. But the longer I lived there, the more I felt the clock was alive. The hour hand didn't just mark time sometimes. It pointed in the direction I had just moved, as if it were watching me. On the third night, I woke up to a strange clicking noise. Stepping out of my room, I saw the clock swaying. Though it had never made a sound before, it emitted a faint, rhythmic sound like breathing, steady and persistent. I stood there, frozen, with the sense that someone had just left the room seconds earlier. I tried removing the battery and unwinding the mechanism. But the next morning, the hands jumped to exactly 7 a.m. as usual. Looking closely at the clock face, I noticed faint scratches beneath the Roman numerals. Not numbers, but letters. Someone had carved into it. When it stops, someone will return. I tried to dismiss it as an old owner's prank, but in the nights that followed, I began to dream. In one dream, I stood before the clock, but it wasn't. On the wall, it was standing alone in a dark forest, surrounded by whispers too soft to understand. In another dream, I saw myself walking toward the clock and turning my back. But the reflection in the glass didn't turn with me. It stayed still, watching me. When I touched the clock face in the dream, I woke up with a jolt, my hand ice cold, and the clock for the first time had stopped ticking. I stood motionless. In the room, the dim yellow light unable to chase away the thick shadows in the corners. The hour and minute hands pointed in opposite directions. No movement, complete silence. I took slow, steady breaths, trying to stay calm. But then I heard a faint tapping like fingernails on glass. From inside the clock, I stepped closer, pressing my ear to the glass. Silence. Then, a whisper right next to my ear. It's time to return. I stumbled back. The lights flickered. The hands of the clock twitched slightly, though no one had touched them. And in the reflection, there was a faint figure standing behind me. Hazy. Like smoke. I didn't turn around. I just stepped backward until my back met the wall. The ticking resumed slower now, like a weakening heartbeat. The minute hand crept along, second by second, until it reached exactly 3:15 a.m., the hour I usually dreamed. The hour the whisper always began. The next day, I nailed a thick cloth over the clock. But I knew it was still ticking. Every night, I heard the hands moving, not steady anymore. It was like it was searching for something or someone. And sometimes I could hear it shift direction whenever I moved through the house. I thought about throwing it out, but every time I touched it, a strange feeling stopped me. As if I did, whatever was inside would come out, so I live with it. I wait not to see what time it is, but to see when it will stop completely. And then someone will return, just like the carving said, dot. Have you ever heard a clock ticking dot dot? When you're sure you've already taken out the battery,